There will be no direct spoilers for any of the Yakuza games in this video. Yakuza is a series that before 2020, I feel everyone had a similar story with it. It's either a game we heard of but never played, or just assumed it was Japanese GTA or something. But when 2020 rolled around with many of us stuck in our homes due to the viral pandemic worldwide, it allowed many of us to broaden our horizons to new games because, well, what else was there supposed to do? Play Chrono Trigger for the 20th time? Well, yes, but I'm sure I could squeeze Yakuza in there too. With memes running rampant during this pandemic, people eventually came across the hidden highlights of the Yakuza series, the hilariously crazy, memeable moments. Now, I got into Yakuza before these memes erupted, so it's crazy to see how someone's outside perception of this series is a complete 180 of mine. I also wanted to mention that, like I said, I got into the Yakuza series a few years ago, but SEGA was kind enough to provide me with copies of the games that I didn't have, such as Like a Dragon for PC and Judgement on PS5 when they released. They even made recording and such easier by providing me Yakuza 3 through 6 on PC. So I wasn't paid to make this video or anything, but they did aid in making this video possible, so shout out to them. Of course, I wanted to support the boys anyway, so I bought the games myself too, but I did want to disclose that since some versions of the game have higher frame rates and stuff than others. But yeah, back on topic. When I got into the series, my thoughts before playing the games was this was some grim and dark story about Yakuza life in Japan and the hardships that come from it. But when I played it, I found out that it's not always dark and serious. There are tons of moments you can find where it's legitimate comedy gold. But because of the memes on social media, most people now go into these games expecting a meme-filled game and then end up being surprised by a story that keeps them on the edge of their seat and even wanting to cry at numerous points. I feel like at one point I was bothered by people wanting to get into this awesome series just because of memes, as those are things that you're supposed to come and be discovered after going through some hardships in the game first, you know? But I've come to realize, who freaking cares, bro? Like, seriously, at the end of the day, we all experience the same story, go to the same nightclubs, go to the same karaoke joints, and so much more. The reason for coming here means nothing, but why we stay here is what's most important. And I truly believe that Yakuza is the single impossible series that has perfected in every single game the balance of when to be serious and when to give the player a breather. It knows to drill into you how serious the situation is, but it's not afraid to let you retreat, get a drink, and maybe help somebody out, giving you time to connect with more of the insanely memorable NPCs and overall reflect on the current situation of the story more. I've never seen a game that even came close to Majora's Mask and Chrono Trigger when it comes to quality of the side quests, but I've gotta say, the majority of Yakuza games have both those games beaten. Again, Yakuza is a series that truly seems impossible for it to exist, but beyond just the general statements like great story and funny memes, there's so much more depth to why these stories and why these memes land so well, and that's because of the main cast of characters. Let's start with Kazuma Kiryu, the primary protagonist of Yakuza 0 through 6. This part is going to be a bit tricky to cover since I'm kinda in a dilemma here. Yakuza 7, also known as Like a Dragon, released late 2020 and was a big help in aiding in this series' popularity. It begins the Ichiban saga for the series, while still being the 8th main entry in the series. All games before it had Kazuma Kiryu as the primary protagonist. We followed his life story from his late teenage years to many decades later. Talking about Ichiban, as he's a character many of the newest of fans would love to hear about, is the smart choice. But for the sake of the history of the series, as I said before, I'm going to start with Kiryu, as again, we've had 7 games before Like a Dragon where he was our main guy. Kiryu is a major reason many people fell in love with this series. Yakuza 0 covering his early years in the Yakuza, evolving into a race to prove Kiryu's innocence in a murder case. The Kiryu saga is a very emotional tale of Kiryu's life from a boy to a man and everything that happened around him during these many long and tough years. He's had to deal with love and loss, betrayal and self-doubt and failure and so much more over and over and over again, to where you can clearly see on his face in so many situations that he just wants all this to be over. But what I see the most in Kiryu's eyes is resolve. Yes, he may be suffering emotionally because of all he went through and carrying the weight of other people's burdens, but that never ever sways him from being who he's always been. A man who will take a bullet for a friend, who will make an explosive sacrifice for the woman he loves, suffer a decade in prison for a brother's action, who will positively influence the life of orphans and show them that the world isn't just monochromatic. There's so much out there filled with complexities that they'll have to brave and discover themselves. It's a tough one-man job being a parental figure to all these people, being a figure they can aspire to be like. This is who Kazuma Kiryu is. Kiryu has done some bad things in his life and never once did he claim to be perfect. But it's because of those mistakes he's made that he does his best to be a positive part of people's lives, whether it be the orphans he cares for, or the cashiers in convenience stores he checks up on, or the random businesswoman who's stressing about work he gives emotional support to. Kiryu is known in the Yakuza world as the Dragon of Dojima, a title earned through crazy impossible odds stacked against him and rising above them, taking on whole clans by himself and re-establishing peace in rotten places. The Dragon of Dojima became a legend in the Yakuza world, inspiring many young people to be just like him. However, others didn't take too kindly for another man being called a dragon, as there's an unwritten law between Yakuza that there can only be one dragon. But time and time again, Kiryu has prevailed. As time went on, the Yakuza began to change, however. Different clan leaders can do that to an organization, but regardless of the changes made, Yakuza as a series redefined, or maybe more accurately, clarified what the Yakuza lifestyle is like. A big aspect of it is about presence, to make a name for yourself and be able to back up the gossip told about you with action. But it's also about making friends. Friends who will be there for you when you're at your lowest. Friends who you can protect when they have no one else to turn to. Being a Yakuza isn't about robbing and beating up or killing random people like bullies. If anything, they're much classier, always dressing up in suits and watches instead of baggy clothes and saggy jewelry. Sure, these things can still happen, but the Yakuza live by a code that every member has to follow. During Kiryu's life, he meets many people. Some of them he thinks of as brothers, some who've had his back for decades, some who betrayed him in his lowest of moments. But it's not just Kiryu who is a focus during these games. One very important person, Goro Majima, is also an extremely important fan favorite in this series. A man who's been in the Yakuza a lot longer than Kiryu, but a man who is so unmistakably insane that you can't help but love him. But the thing about Majima isn't that he's just so wild and so it's just fun to see, it's that every single action he takes has meaning behind it. There's rhyme and reason for his outbursts, his reactions, his anger. He's a man who went through a lot, sacrificed what he wanted most so that others can be happy, and committed to a persona that helps him cope with his failures and losses. Between all his random sparring sessions with Kiryu or his knife fights with thugs, he's a man who can't move on from the past. He's managed to put one foot in front of the other and keep marching, but the pain and sorrow he carries has never subsided. He carries that with him everywhere he goes, and it influences the actions he takes. In a way, you can kind of tell that he feels he's not good enough anymore after everything that's happened, which would explain why he comes off the way he does at people sometimes. He wants these younger people to be better than him, not make the same mistakes that he did. He wouldn't want to be this gushy in front of just anyone, but sometimes it's hard to hide your feelings without them being shown through your actions. And just seeing Majima without remembering what happened in Yakuza 0 and the new content added for Kiwami 2, and his meeting with someone who we thought was long lost in Yakuza 4 is just impossible. I'm still in the camp of Kiryu being my favorite, but I still can't help but feel Majima deserves that spot too. He's a remarkable character that I promise you his story will impact your life. The last character I kind of want to highlight before I touch on Ichiban is Haruka. You can meet her in Yakuza Kiwami, which is a remake of the original Yakuza game for the PS2. So this was actually the first game in the series before SEGA really brought things back with Yakuza 0 as the new starting point for players. Haruka is one of my favorite characters in this series, hence the highlight, mainly due to the progression of this character. We met her when she was only 9 years old. 9! And seeing her all grown up in Yakuza 6's box art is just insane, man. Seeing a character growing up slowly over time helps build a connection with them that you just can't get in one single game. We meet her in Yakuza Kiwami at 9 years old, sitting in the back of a bar filled with dead bodies. Not going to give context for it because of spoilers, but what a freaking way to introduce a character. Haruka is a kid that when you first meet her, you know for a fact that she's, for a lack of a better term, built different. She's a kid that has seen violence comparable to what military soldiers have to endure. She blossoms from a kid who's seen too much and understands way more than she should to a woman who just wants to live a happy life with consistency and peace. Throughout the game, she may not be able to take on whole clans on her own, but that doesn't mean anything when what she does is just as important to Kiryu. She's the strength behind every step he takes, every bit of motivation he has to stand back up, to bear the pain of broken bones, because at the end of the day, all that's going through Kiryu's mind is that the pain of failing you, the pain of no longer being able to be there for you when you need me, it hurts much more than anything bullets can do to me. And this is why Haruka is arguably the most important character in this series. Now, I do want to say here that I haven't actually played every Yakuza game. I'm currently on Yakuza 6 now, and I only sampled Like a Dragon thanks to my homies at SEGA and RGGstudios. But on the topic of Like a Dragon, Yakuza is headed into a very different direction. I can't speak for Like a Dragon as a whole, as I haven't beaten the game yet, but I do have plans to experience the whole thing and make a video on how it impacts me sometime down the line. So make sure you have your notifications on so you don't miss that when it happens. But with this entry, Kiryu's story is over, and likely along with many of the characters we know. Despite still seeing them, they probably won't be major focuses anymore. This is now the Ichiban saga of Yakuza, and with it, SEGA has confirmed that Yakuza, for the foreseeable future at least, will continue to be a turn-based game like a Dragon was. I feel it fits Ichiban's personality though, being a big old Dragon Quest nerd, living life like a game. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, but showing this through gameplay with his team just makes this new style of play feel like Yakuza. If the success of Like a Dragon was anything to go by, I think we have so much greatness in store for the series still. Now, only to touch briefly on Judgment, mainly because it's a spin-off and still relatively new, this is where the action-focused combat of the series past will continue. It's another game I've yet to beat, but around 30 hours in now, and man oh man, I never thought I needed Yakuza through the eyes of a detective that wasn't my boy Date. It feels fresh and new while heavily respecting the series it branches from. I had no idea they'd be announcing a sequel to this game, but the fact that they seem interested enough to make this into a series now has me super eager to finish this game and pin my thoughts down about it one day soon. It's absolutely a game not just for Yakuza fans, but for anyone who is a fan of heavy story, incredible action combat, and super interesting characters. Judgment is a must-play for anyone. But I guess I just wanted to say, play Yakuza. I promise you by the end of it all, it very well may be one of the best journeys you've ever been on. I'm so glad I took that first step, and man, I know I mentioned it like 3 times and I wasn't paid to say anything in this video. Those who follow me on Twitter know how long I've been chilling this series, but seriously now, thank you SEGA. Thanks for making this video be easier to make. Thanks for putting your all into every dialogue box, every street fight, every painful moment, every heartbreaking scene in this series. It's changed my life for the better, and I pray this video can be a proper way of saying thank you, and maybe even inspire others to take the same leap that I did.